In my role as an assistant dean, an environmental scan involves looking around the programs, services, and experiences that our students have and looking for trends, trying to understand what's really happening with our students. Well, I think all environmental scans start informally, with someone looking around and saying, this isn't quite right and I'd like to understand more about it. So in my own classroom teaching, it's trying to understand why students are struggling on a particular content area issue. In my administrative work, it involves looking around and saying, why are students in this particular program not achieving the particular success we're seeking? One way in which I've used environmental scans is to look both formally at student work to see what was emerging in their work and the trends that I could see about an area where students really weren't understanding what I was asking for in a particular assignment. And they demonstrated that they didn't really understand how to access and review high quality research in education. I'd actually started the environmental scan much earlier by doing an informal scan, by thinking about what was happening in my classroom and realizing that I didn't think students had a good grasp of the research concept as it applied to the developmental theories we were studying in my course. And that's what caused me to then look at the formal data sources, the papers and the student work product, to begin to really understand any patterns or trends that emerged from the student performance. I think environmental scans are appropriate for all educators because they're the experts. They know what's happening around them, and by looking around the environment can really assess what needs attention, what might need to be investigated further, and areas that are worth spending more time and energy on. An environmental scan doesn't have to be a solitary activity. While it's important to start and examine what you see happening in the environment, it's also helpful to talk to colleagues and ask them what they're seeing in the environment. Look for patterns and trends that emerge. Look for ways in which you see things similarly and differently, and begin to understand what's happening from a broad perspective. Environmental scans don't just happen in the classroom, although that's frequently a place for folks to start. Environmental scans can also be helpful when looking at questions or challenges on a programmatic level or even an institutional level. One observation at an institutional level is about graduation rates. One thing that we can see is that graduation rates aren't exactly where we want them to be, but we really have to understand what's happening in order to understand how we can then improve graduation rates. So we start by doing an environmental scan institutionally. What are the factors that are contributing to students' graduation rates? And what do we know about what's happening with students' graduation rates? And that's one way that we can begin to understand what's happening on an institutional level. But an environmental scan is really the first place to start. I think environmental scans help me to reinforce what my gut instinct is, that something isn't quite right and I need more information in order to know what really isn't right. So the environmental scan helps me put together pieces of information, and it helps me sort out what's important and what's not important to really solving the problem at hand. The environmental scans give me the foundation for knowing what the real questions that the data should answer, and most importantly, helps me narrow the question. I can spend hours and hours looking at data and not really ever answer the question that I'm really trying to solve. But an environmental scan tells me what I see, what's out there, what's available, what I'm experiencing, and then I know how to really narrow my research question so the data can actually answer the question I'm trying to solve.